welcome to Office Hours. And if you're watching us on YouTube or LinkedIn or Facebook, my name is Joyce Odidison. I'm so excited that you're here with us today. And I am just tickled pink because, a lot of times I come in here and I teach by myself. I pick up a topic and we talk, and you jump in and chat and you tell me how you feel. But today we have a guest. Yes, I have a guest with me. So I want to invite you to and welcome you to our guest today. So I'm actually just going to share that with you so you can see our show today, Office Hours, with Carrie Burd. And we're going to be focusing on emotional wellness. So looking forward to talking with you and learning more. And welcome, Carrie. Join us.
Hey Joyce, thanks for having me. So nice to be
Oh,
here.
my pleasure, my pleasure. So, guys, Carrie was one of the contributors at this quarter's magazine, Faces of Workplace Wellness magazine went out, and she did a brilliant article. And one of the things I'm doing with Office Hours is bringing on our contributors from the magazine to actually put some voice and emotion and face. I know you see their pictures and everything on the magazine, but it's really nice to really hear from them and get a feel as to who they are, their perspectives. And today we have Carrie Burd with us. So, Carrie, let us talk emotional wellness because over the month of March, one of the things that we're focusing on is how to stay emotionally well. And we hear a
Mhm.
lot about mental health. We hear a lot about, but people forget that emotional wellness is a key factor. It is the foundation on stabilizing your mental health. If you already have a mental health disease, then that wellness, that emotional wellness helps you to stay out of crisis mode, keeps you well, keeps you
Mhm.
functional, and allows you to stay healthy a lot longer. So, emotional wellness is a key part of all the areas of our health and wellness. And we
Mhm.
want to talk about it today. So, when you think of wellness and emotionalness, what is one thing that stands out for you, Carrie?
Hmm. I think for me, emotional wellness is really about the ability to sort of produce positive moods, positive emotions, thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and how that drives our actions. And there's a real focus in my
Mhm.
mind on our ability to successfully manage stress and adapt to stressful situations or to deal with setbacks. So it's about resiliency as well.
Mhm. Absolutely. I'm just saying hi to a guest. Hi, Kelly. Thanks for joining us. And
Thank
welcome
you.
here. What comes to mind for you when you think of emotional wellness? What do you think of? What does emotional wellness remind you of? And what is your struggle to emotional wellness, especially at work? Right? Most of us, sometimes it's okay at home and it's okay with our friends, but when we get into the workplace and that to-do list is here and our clients need something and our boss needs something and our subordinates or colleagues, it's just like it becomes that overwhelm. And we hear a lot about overwhelm and burnout and people shutting down.
Mhm.
And part of maintaining emotional wellness, I always talk about those micro improvement strategies, those micro
Mhm.
things that we can do to stay well. It's not going to be okay, I'm going to be emotionally well and it's just going to magically fall out of the sky. It's a
Mhm.
competency. It's a we're developing that self mastery by doing the little things. So this
Mhm.
month we've been talking about things like self awareness. We've been
Mhm.
thinking about things like assertiveness. As
Mhm.
we talk about those pieces, and in your article, you had a really great point. So tell the audience a little bit more about that article and how it builds into emotional wellness.
Sure. So I think the impetus for writing the article is really thinking about a common phenomena that we see coming off of holiday breaks, whether
Mhm.
that's whether you practice Christianity and you celebrate either as in a religious way or secular way the Christmas season or the holiday season. Oftentimes we get something called the post-vacation or post-holiday blues, and that typically coincides with also a spike in what we call seasonal affective disorder, and it particularly affects those of us in the northern hemisphere of the world and typically lasts for up to 6 months of the year. But January and February statistically are the hardest
Artist
months for
ones.
people who suffer with seasonal affective disorder. So it was really wanting to unpack sort of how to recognize those signs of unwellness or
Yes.
post vacation, post holiday blues or seasonal affective disorder and talk through some of the strategies for addressing that. And so,
Mm.
picking up on your point about sort of those micro practices, or I think James Clear refers to it as micro habits. So, rather than wanting to make sweeping, huge changes to our life, how can we take small, sort of baby steps and start initiating some positive micro habits to get
Mm.
us into a healthier pattern of behavior?
That is so important because we forget that it's the little things that matter. It's the same. When I teach wellness, I always tell people, think about when your savings account. It's that compound effect.
Yes.
Every little adds up. It's the same like when you're gain weight. You don't just eat one meal and become fat or overweight. You have to practice or stop practicing healthy habits like going for your
Mhm,
walks, like drinking your
mhm,
water, like chewing your food slowly so you fill up more. All those micro things adds up to help you maintain lean muscle, healthy weight. And it's the same with all the other dimensions of our life. We've been told so much about how to stay healthy, how to reduce our
mhm,
weight, how to build lean muscle. You have to exercise. You
mhm,
need to do the weightlifting. And yes, our body physically, we have to maintain those, but what's inside our body is really what the package is holding. And our emotions are things we cannot see.
mhm,
We feel them and we're just like, I feel so, and I'm not going to, I feel mad, so I'm going to talk to anyone. And it's like, why
mhm,
am I feeling mad? Why am I feeling
mhm,
upset? What is
mhm,
it? What am I becoming aware of?
mhm,
What should I do about it? And when you talk about sad, because many people, and we know here in Canada, it's a big issue for many, many Canadians because we're so far north in the winter and our winters are so much longer. So we're not seeing the sunlight. It's so funny. I have to give you this. My husband and I were watching HDTV because usually I go home and I'm on the treadmill and we spend our evening, we talking and I pop on HGTV and we're watching and there's a couple comes on and like in Italy and he's like, oh, look at the sunlight. I started laughing. I was like, that was the last thing
Missing that.
it was the last thing I was
Yeah.
expecting. And he was like, oh, the
Yeah.
sun there looks so. And, we had such a drastic winter this year. And many
Mhm,
people are not recognizing, I'm not feeling like getting out of bed. My first
mhm,
experience with it, was Carrie, when I did my master's, I went to Victoria, BC,
mhm,
and they
mhm.
don't have as much sun there. And I
Right.
remember sending a message to myself, I can't get out of bed. And I'm like, I had never encountered that before. The heaviness and the atmosphere,
Mhm,
you just feel like there is a blanket over you emotionally. And a lot of clients, when they describe it, but I'm a person, as Manitoba, as cold as it is, we get the sun, even if it's far and we can't actually feel the heat, we have the sunlight. And it's so
mhm,
important for us to recognize what's happening. And it was the awareness that allowed me to say, okay, it's happening. This is what I need to do. And most people are not aware. They're not at that place where they can say, my body is not feeling the way. My thinking is not the way it's supposed to be. And
mhm,
when we're not thinking well, we're not feeling well, we of course don't operate well. And that impacts and can deteriorate our health and wellness in other areas. So what are your thoughts around helping people to gain awareness around
Mhm.
those issues?
Mhm. Well, I think it starts with just sort of understanding the basic sort of cognitive approach and the connection between our sort of thoughts, our feelings, and our moods, or behaviors and actions. That is a cycle that we have some influence over. So what we think drives what we feel. What we feel
Mhm.
drives our behaviors or our actions. And underpinning sort of those cognitive processes are sort of our assumptions or schema, or sort of like the rules that we operate by in life. And those are driven in turn by our core beliefs. So I think, for anybody who's interested in really exploring and understanding both their state of mind and their emotional state, I think it really helps to take a step back and engage in sort of two practices. One is sort of a mindfulness practice of becoming aware of the breath and tension in the body, understanding
Mhm.
how that may become an expression of what's happening in your head,
Mhm.
and trying to find ways to release that tension and recognize that. And the other is to practice journaling. And so, really, just unpacking and getting in touch with how you're feeling about different things. So,
Mhm.
that's creating awareness around links between, I'm feeling this way right now. What was I thinking about just before I felt this way? And
Mhm.
what has been my typical reaction when I feel this way? And how can I kind of disrupt that cycle? So, a great example is doom scrolling or doom surfing. So, doom scrolling, the Oxford Dictionary in 2020 declared it sort of the word of the year. And it's something that unfortunately a lot of us have engaged in heavily throughout COVID, and probably increasingly so with events that are happening between the Ukraine and Russia. And so our minds, our primitive brains are primed to look for threats and danger. And when we are, whether it's, dealing with COVID or watching a war unfold in front of us and thinking about the potential consequences for our loved ones and for ourselves, we're primed to look for those threats and those dangers. And so one of the ways that we cope with that is that we start scrolling for information, believing that, the more information we access, the more we're able to know the unknown or the unknowable. And that gives us like a temporary sense of satisfaction or sense of safety or protection. But it actually starts to devolve from there, because the more we scroll, the more we confirm our belief that there is danger, there is threat, and become sort of addicted to that activity. And it
Mhm.
actually drives a lot of decline in mood, and increases our fears, our anxiety, our worries. It can lead to increased depression. And when we feel all of those things, it decreases our capacity for empathy and compassion. So it's a
Mhm.
really a vicious cycle. So there's been some interesting work done by different researchers and psychologists that talk about not only the power of limiting your doom scrolling or managing your technology habits, but also trying to counteract that by doing something they call joy scrolling, and so, or hope scrolling. So it's
Mhm.
intentionally seeking out positive sources of information and positive news stories, even something as simple as a cat video, for example, that will help kind of temporarily lift your mood. And of course, because our news and our social media feeds are driven by algorithms, the more we search for negative news, the more negative news gets in
Yes.
our feed. So that's an
Yes.
opportunity to sort of counteract that
Mhm.
tendency to sort of beat the algorithm on that. So definitely, I think that's something. And you raise the issue of, in the workplace, how emotional dysregulation or poor management of emotions, or a lack of well-being in the emotional realm really affects us at work. And certainly, I think if there's anything we've come to understand over the last 2 years, is that when we talk about bringing our whole selves to work, that includes all the things that people are dealing with outside of work, which has been
Mhm.
enormous over the last 2 years. So employers really need to pay attention to the emotional well-being of their employees and make sure they're offering them opportunities to manage and avoid burnout, as you've talked about.
It's so interesting how much we need to pay attention to see what we watch, what we listen to. And that is
Mhm.
something that I have been talking about for all time. And like watching the news. How much
Mhm.
news do you consume? Because every channel is telling you the same thing. All right. So we have to be very intentional about that. So my TV
Mhm.
channels are HGTV and the food channell. Okay. So so now my husband is like, are you gonna
Prone
make
to
that
boring
recipe? I
food.
want to
Can't go
eat
wrong.
that. I know.
Well, and
Last
you
night he
raise
was telling me.
yeah, and you raise a good point when you say like everything's the same. I mean, that's there's sort of two interesting things about that. One is that the more different channels we get information on, I know, we're trying to be better consumers of information and to sort of
Mhm.
question the reliability and the objectivity of the sources that we look at. But the more information sources we draw from, the more likely we are actually to become depressed. And in fact, the level of emotional distress experienced by people who regularly visit news apps is the highest among all people. And people who look at Facebook actually have the highest level of depression and anxiety and stress. And people who look at Instagram have the highest levels of jealousy. So, you really have to think about kind of
Yes,
the
it's
impact
true.
that this kind of consumption of information has.
Yeah.
So, Psychology Today did a great article where they gave some tips around how to um, really think about it. So, as you're consuming the information and you realize that you're doom scrolling or you're engaging in unhealthy habits, is to really stop and pause and do the check in with yourself emotionally and say, how am I feeling right now? Like, can I feel that sort of tension in my body? Do I feel distressed or depressed? Am I searching for something? Like, just understand and connect in cognitively and emotionally with
Mhm.
where you are. The second is to ask yourself, is this useful or new information? If it's not new information, it's just more of the same. It's quite likely that you're engaging in doom scrolling, even if you didn't recognize it before that. So just
Mhm.
simply changing things up and saying, like limiting, say, okay, I'm gonna block off 10 minutes at the start of my morning to scan my news feed and get the headlines for the day, and then I'm going to break that activity and I'm going to go off. The other tip is to turn your notifications off, because not only is it a productivity killer to be constantly interrupted with notifications and sort of it takes you out of your state of flow, but it's not great for your mental health.
No, it isn't. There are so many things we do on a day-to-day basis that's depleting our mental resilience and
Hmm.
emotional wellness that, and we
Hmm.
become so used to them that we no longer recognize. Just think, 100 years
Amazing.
ago, if something
Hmm.
happened in England, they would find out 6 months later when the mail came,
Hmm. Or
right?
you'd watch the news at 11 and then you go to bed and that was your only news of the day.
Right? Right?
Yeah.
And
Wasn't
and we're talking
24/7.
even before that, but we have DNA strand. We have
Yeah.
the same DNA strand. And when TV first came out, there was one channel that gave the news, and you watch whatever they said, that was the news. Or we listened to radio. When I was growing up, we listened to radio. I know when my
Mhm.
parents grew up, they didn't have, when they were younger, they didn't have the television news. So you listen to the radio station when the news came on, and there was World News Channel, and you listen to World News. They had
Mhm.
they had the same DNA strand we have now. And look at what we consume now.
Mhm.
I can go on my phone and I can know what's happening in Japan, what's happening in Mexico, what's happening in Canada, what's happening not just my city, Winnipeg, but what's happening in Toronto, what's happening in Calgary, and
Mhm.
all of a sudden my brain has to consume all of that information, and my emotions have to now regulate and decipher how to feel about all of these things. And we wonder why we have
Mhm.
insomnia. We wonder why we have so
Mhm.
much more stress and we feel more overwhelmed. It's not necessarily just work, it's what we how we show up for work has a huge
Mhm.
part. And with COVID-19, work has changed. It's not like we don't most of us don't go to work anymore. Work is wherever you are. So
Mhm.
you could have the kids at home, somebody's sick, the dog's barking. I mean, right? You're on a call and it's like, okay, tell the dog to shut up. Like it's part of life.
Yeah.
Our life has changed. Prior to COVID-19, you wouldn't dare have a dog barking and interrupting a bit. Now you could be teaching a webinar and the dog is barking, and Is a, but so we have changed, our behaviors have changed. But that brings me back to self-awareness when I talked about
Mm,
self-awareness and assertiveness. And so I want to share that too, because I think sometimes people don't they think that others are going to be as on top of their own well-being and their self-care as they should. And
mm,
even from our own family, I know if I'm not assertive with the time for self-care, right? I take my Sabbath off. I have my 24-hour Sabbath. I have family. I have extended family. I have relatives. They want something. I have to be assertive and say, not during that time period. So we do need to be assertive so that we
mhm,
can maintain our self-care. And I
mm,
know for myself, if I wasn't doing that on a weekly basis, I don't know if I
mhm,
would be well. It's just,
mhm,
it's not how heavy. I go hard. I go all
mhm,
week, and then I have that time for recoup. And that's part of that assertiveness when it comes to your well-being, being able to
mhm,
set those times and to maintain those boundaries for
mhm,
self-care. Because
mhm.
when that
It's
doesn't
actually,
happen, yeah,
yeah.
when that doesn't happen, like when I neglect myself, to not take that time, or I participate in something in church a little bit longer than my time, or do something for family extended, I feel it come
Mhm,
the following
mhm,
week. My body tells me you didn't take enough rest. You need that 24-hour rest. And we
yeah.
have to start being more self-aware, more assertive, maintaining those boundaries around our health and wellness so we can maintain our mental wellness. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And we had included in the article in the Faces of Workplace Wellness sort of the 10-point self-care plan that I used with my coaching clients. And I was actually talking to a client this past week about the very same thing that you're talking about is boundaries. And I know, Joyce, you and I have had some conversations about um, one of we often think that before we make a change in our life or before we take on a new habit, we wait to be motivated, but it's actually action that creates motivation, not the other way around. And so if you sit and
So
you
true.
wait to be motivated, you're never actually going to, or very likely not going to, take the action or make the change that you want to make. So you have to start somewhere, and sometimes you have to start
Mhm.
small. And getting back to what I was saying about the conversations you and I have had in the past, connecting that back to your values is often really important. That if creating new habits or taking care of yourself is kind of this nebulous kind of idea, or it comes from a place of guilt or obligation or a sense of a lot of shoulds, like I should be doing this, I should be working out, I should be 10 pounds lighter, I should be spending more time, engaging in spiritual practice, whatever your shoulds are that you're telling yourself, it's
Mhm.
just really important to understand what those underlying values are that are driving that. And it can be really helpful to think about the habits you want to create or change by thinking about the person you want to be. And do your current habits support you being the person you want to be? And are they reflective of your values? If there's a misalignment there, that's a really good place to start, is to just spend some time reflecting on those things.
So true, so important. And I like that when you talk about people waiting to feel good. I'm waiting to feel motivated to exercise.
Mhm.
It's not gonna happen. You have to talk yourself into doing the things that are good for you, because there are
Mhm.
many things that we can do that will help us to regulate our emotional self so that we can develop that self mastery. To tell yourself, like, I'm a morning person. I can get up at 4 a.m. and I'm wide awake. As soon as my eye open, I'm awake. Terrifies my family. My kids probably still need therapy because their mother just wakes up. And so and there are the opposite. They're like my husband. They need that. They can sleep for hours and hours. My body doesn't seem to need that much sleep.
Mhm.
And so I will get up and I will get stuff done. But I've noticed lately that, I'm burning the candle.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I was in bed and I was like, "Don't get up." I was like, What? Where did that thought come from?
Yeah. Well,
And you know,
sometimes
you're
that's your
good.
body's way of telling you though that you're taking on too much, right? Like I think if
Exactly.
you are experiencing that, there's a big difference between getting stuck there and realizing that itself has become a new pattern versus I normally
Exactly.
have a lot of energy. I normally feel replenished by these things, but today or this week I'm not feeling that way. Sometimes you have to listen to that and say, okay,
Exactly.
I'm maybe burning the candle at both ends. I need to take a pause. It's
Exactly.
okay to give yourself permission. Like I think if it's interesting. I was talking to another coaching client recently about how their professional goals were as sort of driven and ambitious as their relaxation goals, and kind of like looking at that and thinking about that and saying sometimes um, our own inner drive or ambition or our competitive spirit actually drives us to do what we do in our free time to be as sort of taxing as what we do in our professional time. And so becoming aware of those motivations and what's driving us gets back to values again, right? If your value, your underlying value or your core beliefs is that you must always strive for excellence and to be the best, how does that show up for you in your personal
Exactly.
life and even in how you choose to exercise or how you choose to eat? There are some people who become extremely rigid about their food choices because there's this underlying value or belief system about what they put in their mouth and the choices they make and how that reflects on them as a person. So just to be mindful of all the things that drive us, and really in a lifetime that's we call it the VUCA world, right? It's complex, it's volatile, it's uncertain, and we're sort of all scrambling around to deal with so much incoming information and so many pressures on us that it can feel almost self-indulgent to take the time to stop and think about what are we thinking, what are we feeling, what is our body telling us, and to take action on that.
So true. So, so true. And you know, it had to it that's why I was like, I'm staying up too late at night with my husband. He's off
Mhm.
work. I should be so I was like, I'm working full, and then I go and hang out with him, and I was like, no, like last night, I was like, good night. I am gone. Because
I
he
think
and
my
my son
husband
are
could relate
like
to
always
you,
they can sit there and talk. We're enjoying this conversation, and I'm like, what time is it? I am the type of person that I could go to bed at 7 p.m., 8 p.m. I'm good. And I'm
Joyce.
up 11 a.m., 11 p.m. at night. I was like, I can't do that. I can't wake up in the morning. My body is not used to that. I need to. And it's those little things that adds up. And when we talk about those micro moments, it's really recognizing, what do I need to change? What is the quick thing that I need to change, address, shift, right? That I need to do.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
what are some things that motivate me? What are the things I like to do that allows me to feel better, get in a better
Mhm.
place? And for me, it's like, okay, I'm going to walk on the treadmill and do my devotion, do my reading there, my morning meditation on the treadmill. So then that gets me going. And I was like, okay, make sure you go to bed on time. So no,
Mhm.
but it's
Mhm.
those little things that we do because I enjoy being with my family and my son, my husband, and we're having conversation. And I'm like, that is nice. But sleep is also important because if I
Yeah.
let myself go and I become run down, then I become prone to getting sick, and no,
Right.
they have to worry about me. So
Right.
it's a
Yeah.
balance. Everything in life is a balance, whether it's our
Mhm.
emotional or health or mental health. We need to look for
Mhm.
those boundaries. We need to set boundaries. We need to uh, be confident in asserting that this is important. My health
Mhm.
and wellness is important. My sleep is important. How much water I
Mhm.
get in my body is important. And so we
Mhm.
need to start making those little priorities because they add up to health and wellness. They add up to us being able to be productive and be resilient.
Mhm. I know, I think it was, Audre
It's
Lorde said self-care isn't indulgent, it's self-preservation. And so, it's
Yes,
really
yes,
important.
yes.
We can't look after others unless we look after ourselves. So it's particularly crucial for care providers and for parents to make sure that they're really taking care of themselves and not just taking care of other people. But it was interesting when you're talking about sort of those micro habits and micro practices. That was another thing we touched on in the article from the winter issue was, you know, some of the strategies for creating great habits. And we talk about this in your coaching program, Joyce, is that idea of habit stacking and using that idea of sort of what's the reminder or the cue that happens in our environment, and how do we create rewards for ourselves as we go along. And all those things are super important. So one of my clients had a goal or has a goal of wanting to write and self-publish a book by the end of 2022. And so she was struggling with the
Good.
fact that she was having a really hard time getting down to the business of actually writing, and that it was something that brings her great joy, but just hadn't been something she'd been able to do. So we sort of unpacked, how she spends her days, and we looked for where those opportunities might be, and we talked about how do we create. Because she realized that one of the best times for her to write was at the end of the day. That for her, it was a great transition activity to get her out of her workday and into her evening. And it sort of worked with where her peak energy periods were. So we talked about what she could do to create those visual cues in her environment to get her sort of primed for that activity. And so it was like simple things like, and she came up with the plan, but it was just something we talked about. It was like, lighting a candle, having her, favorite notebook and her favorite pen close by, as she ends the workday, shutting down her computer, going to make herself a cup of tea and coming back. And so she's sort of primed and has the visual cues to make writing something that she's going to be drawn to and want to do. So I think, that's a great way to create new habits, is to really focus on how to set the stage for your success. So tell me,
Yes,
how do
absolutely.
you,
And habit forming.
I was just going to say, what did you do to sort of make exercise a regular part of your routine? How did you set yourself up for success with that habit?
You know what, Carrie? This is a very good question. Because one, I've always been a very curious person. I was saying this to my son. I was like, I remember my uncle had a book and people were doing different poses. I didn't even know what yoga was then. It was like I was maybe 12 and he had this book with different poses and I started experimenting. Goodness, good thing I didn't break my neck. but but I've always been one to I love outdoors, I love outdoor activities, I love being outside and I love exercise. So I find that I feel better, I'm more motivated, my thinking is clearer when I exercise. I'm a big girl. Exercise is not what I don't exercise to lose weight. I exercise to stay healthy and well. Because if I was saying I'm going to lose 10 pounds, I wouldn't. I'm working out. And that's not my motivator. Some people are motivated different. For me, it's about self-care, self-management. So it's just been part of my life. I have had to shift it though different times. I'm a morning person, so getting up and working, doing my devotions. So I bring my I have a treadmill with a big desk on it. So I do my writing, I can put my computer on there. And so I do my reading. I got a reading pen so I can sit my book on there or a tablet and I can read on there. I love to read. So we just shift the house again. So when I shift, I put it so I can actually watch HGTV or the Food Channel while I'm working out. So I do that evening. So those are because if I'm not walking while I'm watching the Food Channel, I might go to the cupboard. So it's like I have to be here when I'm watching that because I was like, I need to be here, so I'm not tempted to follow along and eat what they're eating. Not that I have those things in my house, but and it's different things for different people. Sometimes I work out in the morning, but I find that this season in my life that my husband is home evening. So we're hanging out on the treadmill. He works out during the day. So we're talking and I'm on the treadmill and I'm walking and we're talking. And I'm like,
Mhm.
this is convenient. We have to make exercise convenient for us. And there is such
Mhm.
a emotional high you get from it. Like in the morning, when I work out in the morning, I do more for more robust exercise and get my workout high. But in my evenings, it's just my walk. So I go in the morning and I'll do my rebounder and I will do my push-ups and sit-ups and so forth. But that's usually get me maybe 250, 300 steps. And then in the evening, when I go home, then I walk on the treadmill. If I'm
Mhm.
going to watch TV, then I may as well walk on the treadmill while I'm watching it. That's kind of what I told
That's
myself.
great. So you
And
figured
I
out a
do
way
it.
to
But I
cut it.
actually went out
Yeah.
skiing this year. I did
Mhm.
cross-country skiing this year. That was one of the
Oh, did
things
you?
I started.
That's neat. Are you enjoying it?
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I
I
tried it too.
love
I
it.
really like that. That and snowshoeing.
I love
Yeah. Well, so it sounds like you
So we'll
found
have
a
to we'll have
different
to make a
way of
date of it.
combining. Sorry, I think I missed the audio there. Just a bit of a lag. Nope. Okay.
What was that? I'm sorry.
I think there's a bit of a
Go
lag in
ahead,
the
Carrie.
audio. So I might have talked over you a bit there. Sorry. No, I was just going to say it sounds like you found a great way to combine things to make you feel like that time that you're spending working out is really productive for you because you're sort of doing more than one thing at the same time, and both of them are kind of feeding you in different ways, but you don't feel like you're having to make trade-offs, unnecessary trade-offs. That's a great strategy. Yeah. And then you were saying about the cross country skiing, and I was saying yes, I love cross country skiing too, and we actually were
It's
just
interesting,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, Carrie.
You're
I
saying
think I'm not hearing you. Were you saying something?
no, go ahead.
Hello? Oh, did I lose
I'm here.
you? Oh,
I'm
I can't
here.
hear you. Okay, good. I'm glad you're still here. You
Yeah.
were telling me about what you're doing.
Oh, I was just saying we had
All
tried some
right.
cross country
Well, we
skiing.
are just coming to the end of this. Oh, do you love it? Did you enjoy it?
Sorry, the audio's off.
Okay. So we're having some technical issues at yeah, you've been freezing a little bit back and forth. So sorry about that.
Okay, it
We're at
happens.
the mercies of the of the network. But talking about cross country skiing, it's such a good workout. And
Mhm.
it's a good exercise in snowshoe. Just lots of different ways. Even in the winter, we have to find ways to because that helps with your emotions, it helps with your feelings, helps you,
Mhm.
and it helps you if you're mad at someone. That's a good way to get that frustration out when you're out there. You can just think about why you're upset about them, and if you have frustration from work, you can bring it out there and leave it on the ice, and then you can leave it and go back home because we
Mhm.
have to get rid of those negative emotions. We have to recognize
Mhm.
them, and then we have to express them in a healthy way. And exercise is one way to deal with,
Absolutely.
strong emotions like anger,
Mhm.
resentment, even fear. So one
Mhm.
way to get it out of our system.
Mhm. It also
But
helps
Carrie,
us
we're
sleep
just
better.
coming up to the end of our time together. Any last thoughts or tips that you want to share with on emotional wellness?
Hmm. I think I would encourage
Hmm.
anybody to just
Okay, so I'm not hearing Carrie. I'm not sure. Um, oh, I'm not quite sure why we're having so much technical issue here. Are you back?
there's a lag in the
Hi,
video,
Carrie.
and so I start to talk and
Oh,
then I hear you talk.
okay.
So
Well, okay, I'm not hearing you, so I'm talking. Go ahead.
Can you hear me now? No, a few audio problems. I would just, my parting advice would be for anybody to just focus on understanding that connection between our thoughts, feelings, and then our behaviors, and investing in some journaling and some mindfulness practice to get in touch with that, and then practicing, the 10 habits of good self-care that I talk about on my website. So if anybody's interested, you can visit carriebirdconsulting.com, and I'll be posting after today's show access to the 10-point self-care plan. So take a look, and it's all pretty practical, easy stuff to follow, but it's just a matter of stacking healthy micro habits can sometimes lead to some bigger changes.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Carrie.
That's
And
really
those of
fun.
you at the end of the show, you have a link to the emotional wellness cleanse as well. Spring is a time to clean. We clean our houses, we clean our garage, we get all the winter dust out. We can do the same for emotions. This is a great time to do that emotional cleanse and get yourself refreshed and get ready for spring, summer, and give your emotions some reflection, sunlight. Get rid of those negatives that's depleting your energy, where we leak vital energy, and that actually keeps us in a place of depression. So when we can look at that emotional and put away some of those words and comments and thoughts that are taking vital energy from us, it wakes us up and it helps us to be more cognitively astute at what are we thinking, what are we saying, how are we connecting our thoughts to our feelings and our behaviors, and how can we be more emotionally well. Because as we've just said, it is a practice, and it starts with the little things and it adds up, and so we can do that together. Thanks, Carrie, for being here. It was a great conversation. Thanks for being our guest today and sharing your wisdom with us. Thank you for those of you who've been watching. Yes. All right. And we'll see you at the next show. Bye now.